joining in. I think we have like about another 10 more students who's going to come in. So feel free to copy and paste the class attendance password, all right, in the chat box so that your friends can get their attendance signed. All right. So, if in any way that you cannot hear me, just unmute yourself and just shout to me and say that you can't hear me. Okay. All right. So here goes. This is chapter 3, cognitive development. I just want ramai pula yang masuk masa kecederaan ni ya. I just wanted to refresh you back on the first week of class. We talked about what this course is all about. So again, this course really has to do with preparing you to become an effective, efficient teacher / parent, right? And the number one thing that you have to remember from the first class the other day was the fact that teachers account for 30% of a student's success, meaning that even if the child or the student gives their 100% in their studies and everything, but that only accounts for 70%, and 30% really comes from you, which means that you are the determining factor as to whether or not they can score an A or not, right? And part of being that effective, efficient teacher / parent, right, you need to engage in reflective thinking, or in other words, muhasabah. And part of this muhasabah exercise is, as a teacher, right, is engaging in action research, because research will produce concrete evidences as to whether something really works, something doesn't work, it doesn't lie, right? So that is why as teachers you need, or as like in the area of social sciences, because as a teacher, you're not just teaching physics and chemistry, but you are also engineering the human child, right? So you are also by default a social scientist. So part of being a social scientist is where you can actually appreciate and understand social science research. So as a teacher later on, you may want to engage in action research as part of your continuous professional development, right? And then moving on to chapter 2, we talked about, again, I told you guys the other day, right, that half of the course really has to do with you understanding developmental psychology. So last week we talked about the first parts of developmental psychology, right? The brain development, and then there's physical development, there's language development, and how these three fundamental developments eventually lead to early school skills like literacy and numeracy. And you would understand by now that if kids do not know how to read and write and count from early on, that's where all the STEM problems arise, right? Part of the issue of the sharp decline in STEM uptake by Malaysians is simply because of the fact that we have poorer fundamental skills at the elementary level. It starts off right from the beginning, right? I couldn't put it all on your shoulders because you guys are being trained to become chemistry, physics, math teachers, STEM teachers, right? But to the very least, you can re-engineer these students when they come to you, right? And you can actually train your own children, your future children, right? So that's the whole picture about the issues accumulating in the decrease in STEM uptake and so on in Malaysia. And you would understand that a country, if it wants to move forward, it really has to rely on science and technological development. So if we do not have our in-house talent in science and technology, we will forever depend on outside technology, and we will never become a developed country. I mean, if you are, thinking that way. So this chapter 3 now talks specifically about cognitive development. All right. So last week we talked about brain development, the brain as an organ. And if I can give you an analogy, right? So last week we talked about a computer, but today we're talking about how that computer works. All right. But because the computer is pretty much something that is man-made, so it really has a straightforward manual if you want to reboot it, if you want to upgrade it, if you want to troubleshoot the computer, right? Because it is man-made and it has a manual. But the unique thing about the brain is that, well, if you're a God-believing person, you would understand that the brain is God's greatest creation. And it's not just the brain, which is the God's greatest creation, but the mind or the thinking, the processor that comes with it is God's greatest creation. And because of that, it is a very complicated, very complex, very sophisticated machine, right? So last week we talked about brain development. This week we're talking about the thinking development, the processes of that brain. Now, because of the fact that we did not create our brains, there would naturally be different people with different schools of thoughts. Oops, trying to, what did I just do? Trying to, let me just like close this. Trying to explain how the brain works. All right. So you need to understand that in psychology, it's part pure sciences and it's part social sciences, because it tries to really provide evidence, like hard sciences, hard science evidence about how the human mind works. But at the same time, because the human is actually a human, right? So that's why psychology is also part social sciences, right? The application of the human mind relates to the social sciences, and that's why it's mostly housed in the social sciences. So what I'm trying to say here is that in the hard sciences, that what you guys are doing right now, if A is A, it's A. If it's B, it's B, you know, and things like that. It's very clear cut. If it's black, it's black. If it's white, it's white. If it's 50% gray, it's 50% gray. It's something like that. But when we talk about the human person, the human mind, the human child, how we interact and so on, there is no clear cut as to what is exactly right. So what I'm trying to say here is that different people, different scientists coming from different backgrounds will have different ideas about how the human as in this person says it could be this way. Now another person says it could be this way, and both could be correct and both could not be correct 100% of theories, because you need to understand a certain construct, a certain concept from different angles, because there's no one clear-cut way of trying to understand it. It's not black and white, is what I'm saying. Okay, so in this chapter, in cognitive development, you will be looking at the idea of cognitive development scholars, basically. So one, this guy, okay, so let us look at the key questions first, because like I told you guys last um, into the key questions of the chapter and see if you can answer them. So if you can answer these key questions, you can somehow tell yourself that you have mastered the topic. All right. So the key questions for chapter 3 would be, according to Piaget, right, there are 4 factors that contribute to the development of thinking from infancy all the way until adulthood, from when you were a baby up until where you are right now. You guys are adults already, right? So how does thinking develop? Okay. And then again, according to Piaget, what are the 4 stages of cognitive development? And what are some issues educators need to consider when working with those in the 4 stages? Meaning that if kids are in the first stage, as a parent, as a teacher, how do you teach them? How do you interact? How do you nurture them, given the fact that they are in the first stage? If they're in the second stage, what is it like? If they're in the third and fourth stages, what are they like? All right. You don't treat children the same way across all stages. All right. That's going to be really problematic. And then moving on, there's this second guy called Vygotsky. Vygotsky. All right. So for Vygotsky, what roles do social and cultural influences play in Vygotsky's ideas about children's cognitive development? So you need to understand that this guy, this Russian guy, Vygotsky, he says that, well, you guys have watched that video from last week, right? About Oksana Malaya, the one that turned into a dog and things like that, simply because she was exposed to an environment where dogs were caring for her instead of human parents, right? So she took up on becoming a dog, basically. That goes on to show to us that the environment really shapes how the brain develops, right? So Piaget somehow doesn't take into account the environment in his definition about cognitive development. So Vygotsky, on the other hand, tries to address this disparity by saying that your brain is capable of learning so many things, but at the end of the day, it's the social factor, it's the cultural factor that really plays a role in shaping one's thoughts, one's thinking. And thought then shapes your sikap, your attitude, and thought also then shapes your behavior, you see. And the thing with thought is that thought is being shaped by, again, culture, by language, by the social environment. So that's how things are. So it is not wrong to say that Malays are Malays because of the language that they speak, because the language that they speak actually influences the way they think, and the way they think will shape the way they feel, and the way they feel will so on affect the way they behave, something like that. So it's not wrong to say that you are a certain kind of person because of your culture, basically. All right, I'm not trying to stereotype or trying to be racist or anything like that, but there is some psychological basis as to why people behave the way they behave because of the culture that they belong to. All right. Now, the next one would be what changes in children's processing of information with development, and what mechanisms influence cognitive development according to information processing theories. So what I wanted to say here is that, let me go ahead to the next slide. All right. There are actually, I think you guys can see, there are actually three distinct subtopics in this chapter. So one was the Piaget, the 4 stages of cognitive development. And then there's Vygotsky, number 2, talking about how the culture shapes your thinking, all right? The culture and the social factors that shapes your thinking, or in other words, how the environment shapes your thinking. And then the third one is actually a more scientific one. It's more of a neuroscience background, right? More of a cognitive science background. It's called the information processing theory, meaning that it looks at cognitive development from the perspective of how your brain processes information. All right. So like right now, you're listening to me, but instead of last week where you saw me physically, you can see me, you can hear my voice directly speaking to you. Today we are speaking in the form of like an online platform, right? So how does your brain actually process this information differently from when you were in class, having to sit nicely in rows and dressing up and coming to my class, as opposed to this week where you might be lying on your bed with your pajamas, or I'm not sure, like whatever you're doing, you see, whether you've taken a bath or haven't taken a bath, it's different. Maybe perhaps the way you process your information would be different. Your level of attention could be different. Your working memory today could be a bit different, given the fact that some of you are fasting, some actually had suhoor, some did not have suhoor, some actually just woke up, some actually just rebooted, some did not even sleep. Maybe you had mungkin mengaji 3 juzuk malam tadi and things like that. So how does all those things actually affect your capability of processing information? Or in other words, you're on your machines right now, right? Depending on what machines you have, ada yang ada Intel i7, right? Ada yang Intel i3, ada yang pakai iPad Pro. So the processing speed can be fast, but maybe the capacity is kecil, or maybe the capacity is kecil but the RAM is slow. So that's information processing. So there's this thing called the working memory, your term memory, and so on. So if you want to know like what kind of researcher I am at the graduate level, right? Lecturers do research. So I am actually, my area of research is specifically on information processing theory. I'm a cognitive psychologist. In the area of educational psychology, I really look into this thing. So the things that I do is that I look at people's attention span, I look at people's working memory levels, I look at people's perceptual processes, visual perception, things like that. All right. So what I'm trying to say here is that this one is a bit complicated for your fasting brain, although it's still early in the morning. So what we're going to do today is that we're just going to look at Piaget's theory and we will look at the Vygotsky's theory, but we will not look at the information processing theory today. Because later on in the semester, we have this topic on cognitive learning theories. All right, so I will revisit the topic on information processing theory during that time. Now, for those of you who are kiasu and worried about your ujian satu, so it's safe for me to say that the information processing theory tak masuk dalam ujian satu. The soalan exam will not cover information processing theory for ujian satu. Okay, so I'm going to skip entirely on that part today. Okay, so let me go ahead and zoom in to the Piaget's theory. Okay, here, I think you guys can see. All right, so for the Piaget's theory, this is just an overview first, okay? So for the Piaget's theory, there are, again, he says that there are 4 stages of cognitive development, okay? So the first stage is you look on the left side, all right? Sensory motor thoughts, right? Sensory refers to your senses, right? Your 5 senses, your hearing, your sight, your smell, your touch, right? And taste, right? So sensory. And then motor means pergerakan, right? Motor means pergerakan. So at this stage, kids at this stage, so basically it's babies lah, right? So they think, by using their 5 senses and by exploring around like merangkak and things like that, and everything dimasukkan dalam mulut, right? Because that's pretty much how they explore the world and trying to make sense of the world. And then there's the pre-operational thoughts, all right? And then there's the concrete operational thoughts, and then there's the formal operational thought. So the three next stages will be pre-operational, operational, concrete operational. Okay, the keyword here is operational, pre-operational, concrete operational, and formal operational. So supposedly you guys are already at the formal operational thought, right? Okay, the next one that we will be looking at is influences on development, right? So what actually affects cognitive development according to Piaget? So he says, of course, maturation, as you get older, the brain actually matures, so the thinking processes will also mature. And then you engaging in different types of activities. Maturity alone will not mature your thinking if you do not engage in different things, right? So that is why in school we have we have the curriculum, but we also have the co-curriculum. We also have like Hari Canteen. We also have like Hari Sukat and so on, because we actually want kids to be involved in different things, because all these different life experiences will eventually shape the thinking. All right. And then social interaction. Again, we've actually watched the video last week on how when you're deprived of social interaction, your brain doesn't function as it should as a human, right? Okay, the next one is equilibration. All right, this is a term that's very common in physics and chemistry, right? Reaching equilibrium is all that you guys do, right? Trying to reach equilibrium. So what this actually means is that, let me give you an example here. Minggu ni dah minggu ketiga, right? Minggu ketiga. So last week, minggu pertama, all right? You come into my class blank lah, basically, like a blank slate. But you have ideas about being a teacher. You have a bit of an idea about what psychology is and things like that. But you come to my class and you were given like expectations on how you can score an A in this class and so on. And then I started talking about all these terms, very basic terms, right? And you seem to be able to understand. Okay lah, all right. So you come to class in equilibrium. Maksudnya macam you're in a state of stability lah, all right? But when I start telling you things, all right, you have to actually link it with your past knowledge if you actually understand what I'm talking about. And so far, so good. She's just talking about how to become a good parent, how to become a good teacher, and so on. Okay, fair enough. And then by the end of the class, during the class, you were in a state of disequilibrium because you were trying to make sense of the class. But by the end of the class, you felt that, okay, I get it. So you're ready to move on to the next class and so on. And then come week 2, I started talking about different things, all right? Brain development, physical development, language development. And then you were like, you come to the class in a state of equilibrium, but then you started listening to all these other new terms. And then some you remember, some you don't remember, some you understand, some you don't understand. But if you go back home to college and then you start reading about it and so on, you get back into a state of equilibrium. But let's say last week you don't understand anything, or worse, you didn't come to my class, right? Or worse, you were paying attention. And then this week, you are no longer in a state of equilibrium, all right? You are in a state of disequilibrium. You're not stable because from last week, you tak ingat apa-apa, you tak faham apa-apa because you didn't even come to class. And now today, this lecture is starting to talk about theories, and she's talking about all these alien names like Piaget and Vygotsky and whatever it is. She's talking about all these new terms. It doesn't sound as if it's hard, but if you decided not to pay attention, all right, you will end this class in a state of disequilibrium again. Now you come to next week and then the following week, and there's just so many other theories going on and so on. Again, because of your lack of attention and you didn't revisit the materials and so on. So you will be in a constant state of disequilibrium for FCE 3200. And by week 12, when everything is due, especially in your other courses as well, this is the part where you want to kill yourself, right? This is just for FCE 3200, but you also have your other classes. And if you continue in a disequilibrium loop, there's just so many tabs in your head open, and they are all in a state of disequilibrium. You see, this is where all the mental health issues come from, basically, for university students, that you are always in a constant state of disequilibrium because you did not come to terms with what you were supposed to study for each week. So you are always in a state of berhutang dengan yourself. Yang ni tak faham, yang ni pun tak faham, yang ni lagi teruk. Aku pun tak tahu apa yang aku tahu, aku tak tahu apa yang tak tahu. So you don't even know what to study. See, so that's what Piaget means by equilibration. But I will talk into greater detail in a while on what actually happens in between those processes. There's the idea of accommodation, assimilation, and so on. Okay. Which is actually the third part, the assimilation and accommodation of schema. So when we talk about Vygotsky, all right, so again, Vygotsky really has to do with telling you that cognitive development is really influenced by social and cultural factors. So there's the internalization, there's the social interaction, there's language as a mental tool. So what he's actually trying to say is that you think using language. The more languages you know, the more mental tools you have to think, because different languages actually connects you with different cultures, to different social environments. When you speak English, it's a whole different culture. The way you think will be different when you speak English, when you write in English, when you write your reports and things like that. And when you think of Malay, it's going to be a bit different. And when you think in Mandarin, for example, it's going to be even more different, especially given the fact that it's a tonal language, And then when you perhaps think in Arabic, it's going to be it's even crazier because it's a genderized language, in the sense that the table is a male, the chair is a female, the moon is a male, the sunshine is a female, things like that, right? So again, language shapes thoughts. The more languages you know, it's pretty much telling you that the more intelligent and the more cultured you are as a person, because you have access to various mental tools. And then he also talks about this ZPD, the zone of proximal development, that at the bottom part, right? The zone of proximal development, right? So the zone of proximal development, according to Vygotsky, is that kalau you nak jadi a good, efficient teacher, you actually need to understand the current level of the students, okay? Which means that what he's trying to say is that humans learn best when you actually teach them one level higher than their current level. Okay, what this means is that kalau you ajar budak darjah 1 English, you would perhaps understand, you would have a general perception that children at the age of 6, 7 years old dah pandai membaca, dah boleh menulis. So maybe we can actually help them write sentences next, write sentences. But if, like kids at 6 or 7 years old, they're only learning to read and write, and suddenly you want to teach Shakespeare to them, that doesn't make sense, does it? Right? There's just so many other things that they need to reach and attain in order for them to be able to actually appreciate Shakespearean poetry, right? They need to learn the basics of literature. They need to understand about simile, analogies, metaphors, whatever it is, so many other things in order for them to be able to understand, appreciate, and enjoy the learning processes of learning Shakespearean poetry. You see? So if you can understand the zone of proximal development, you will also understand why a lot of Malaysian children actually fail in STEM subjects. It's because to them, to a lot of our students, right, when they come into tingkatan 4, right, masalahnya tingkatan 4 belajar maths, belajar physics, belajar chemistry, let's say lah kan. Tapi CV pun dia tak hafal lagi. How? Right? How? Right? And that is why, people just dread add maths. They cannot enjoy additional maths. They just cannot enjoy doing differentiation and things like that, trigonometry and things like that, simply because of the fact that they haven't even mastered the basics of maths, you see. They haven't even mastered the basics of algebra to even understand about calculus 1, calculus 2, calculus 3, for example, you see. So again, as teachers, right, you need to understand students' current level, which is, we call it N. N is the current level of understanding in basic science or in basic chemistry, in basic physics, for example. And when you go into class, you actually introduce them to one level higher than the current level. Now you're going to ask me, well, I'm going to have like about 40 students in my class. How is it even possible for me to really understand which level they are in? We have individual students. Well, basically that's our challenge as a teacher. You would understand that there's a normal curve, right? So probably most of the students will fall under that normal curve. But there will be outliers yang memang sangat pandai dan sangat tak tahu apa-apa. But you actually need to know where that normal curve is so that you don't really teach too high. You would understand that maybe if you go to, I'm not being stereotypical here, but let's say you go and teach in a sekolah orang asli, sekolah rendah kan, you would somehow understand that even though they are at grade 5, grade 6, right? Given the fact that English is not their second language, English could potentially be a fourth language in their household, right? So you would understand that the N+1, the zone of proximal development for orang asli children in English would be very different from children, 5th, 6th grade Malaysian children attending a school in downtown Putrajaya, for example. You see, so you need to actually understand that general idea of where the level is. Then only you can become that relatable, efficient, effective chemistry/physics teacher. All right. So kalau takkan kita macam terus ajar whatever, kita pula shock sendiri kan, memang suka lah nak ajar benda yang susah-susah ni kan. But what is the whole point of going to class, preparing all the lesson plans and so on, all the lab, the experimental materials and so on, when students don't even understand a thing? You're wasting your time, you're wasting their time, you're wasting everybody's time. So that's pretty much the unwritten challenge for STEM teachers. Okay. All right. So I think you guys have, that general idea already. So let's move on. So again, Piaget. So let's move back to Piaget. All right. So he says that there are 4 stages of cognitive development: sensory motor period, pre-operational period, concrete operations, and formal operations. Now, if you can see here, you will realize that the stages of cognitive development is actually divided into, given that Piaget says that there are 4 stages of cognitive development, the schools worldwide somehow prescribes to this idea, and therefore that is why from birth to 2 years old there's the there's the childcare center, right? 2 to 6 to 7 years old would be like the play school, kindergarten, and primary play school and kindergarten, right? And then 7 to 11 or 12 years old would be the primary school, the elementary school. And formal operations is sekolah menengah and above. You see, so you would see that how educational institutions is actually divided into these four cognitive stages. It's based on Piaget, actually. All right. Oops. Moving on. All right, so the sensory motor period, I will actually show you guys a video in a while so that all these would make more sense. But enough for me to highlight that when you were a baby, that's kind of like too long ago. Babies, right? Babies, they struggle with object permanence. What this means is that they're not really sure because their brain is not fully developed yet, right? I told you guys, right, that human babies are born with half-baked brains. Sekejap ya, saya rasa macam saya punya azan ni dia macam tak tahu ikut negara Turki ke apa. Tiba-tiba dia azan subuh. Sekejap tahu, sekejap. All right. So babies, they were born with half-baked brains, and I did tell you guys that if babies were born with fully functioning brains at childbirth, all mothers will have died when giving birth to babies, right? The head will be so big. All right, so this is why babies are actually born blind. So there's no need for you to actually say that you're going to buy like fancy toys and so on and waste your money. And when you see a baby smile, you think that you're so handsome because you're handsome and things like that. It's not because of that. They really cannot see up until the age of 6 months old. All right, they can only see like a very blurry outline of everything. Now, if you try and think about this perhaps has to do with God. If you're a God-believing person, you know that humans are actually created by God. So you would understand that perhaps God is actually trying to protect that still developing brain because, again, according to the information processing theory just now, right, everything comes from the senses. And even Piaget says that to develop your thinking, everything comes from the senses. So the vision is a very powerful sense. So that is why perhaps during the first 6 months of a baby's life, they are actually their vision is actually blind. They're actually very blurred. It's to protect that still developing brain. If the babies can actually see accurately 100%, 6/6, they can see things as we see things, the brain can potentially get short-circuited, you see. But the brain is not ready yet. So there's just too many things coming in at the same time. So it could potentially get short-circuited. So given the fact that the baby's brain is not yet fully developed, right? In fact, brain development only reaches completion at the age of 21 years old, which is about your age. You see, the one at the prefrontal cortex, this is the final one to fully develop, and it only fully develops at the age about 21 years old. So this is why car insurance is more expensive for younger kids, like yang umur 16, 17 yang ada lesen motor tu kan. The insurance is more expensive because of the fact that this part is not fully developed. And there's also a reason why umur mengundi adalah 21 before this, because of the fact that the brain, the higher order thinking processes that's involved in complex problem solving and decision making and reasoning only fully develops at the age of 21. Because kids at the age of 18 could be highly suggestible. They're still, reckless and so on, But of course, and then Syed Saddiq says that undi 18, and okay, but that was why you actually look at the Malaysian Pilihan Raya the other day and a lot of unexpected results and things like that, because people as younger kids are actually suggestible to anything, and when you rely a lot on TikTok as your main source of information, again, the environment shapes your thinking. So if you consume TikTok, that's basically what's going to be, your brain is going to be filled with TikTok. If all you consume day in, day out is K-dramas, that's the only thing that's going to be in there in your brain, basically. All right. So going back to the object permanence, right? Babies actually struggle to understand whether or not an object really exists atau tidak. So this is why babies, bila ibu dia ada dekat depan dia happy lah kan. And then bila ibu dia hilang, pergi dapur misalnya, dia rasa macam when you are out of sight, you are you totally vanished. And that makes them nervous. And that's why they cry. So that's why babies, they like peekaboo. You know yang main cak-cak tu? Like you close your face and then you're gone, and then they will laugh, but they laugh nervously. And then when you open your face, like cha, right, and then there you are. So they get excited and they laugh. So if your girlfriend is like that, bila you ada dia happy, you tak ada dia nangis, maybe dia stuck dekat stage ni lah kan, the sensory period stage ni lah kan, macam tu. So babies, they struggle with that, but as they grow older, like by the first year of life, they start to understand that kalau kita tak ada tu, maybe kita pergi somewhere. They start to actually understand that, but they may still get things wrong there. All right. And then there's also imitations, because we have mirror neurons. So we imitate a lot of our environment. All right. But the whole point here is that this stage is dominated by motor and sensory activities. So that is why they like to crawl, and then they like to touch things. And when we say don't touch, they will still touch it, because that's just how they explore the environment. That's just how they make sense of the environment. That's how their brains develop. And if you guys deprive your babies from this, and all you show them is actually a 2D YouTube video day in, day out, and they're not allowed to explore in the playgrounds, in the gardens, going to the zoo and things like that, definitely it will have an impact on their cognitive development. As I told you guys the other day, that the COVID pandemic, the lockdown loop actually has caused at least 2 baby cohorts, their IQ levels are being slightly lower. Scientists have projected that the IQ levels will be slightly lower, or the cognitive development is going to be slightly lower than those born before or after the lockdown loop, because these are critical periods. And yet babies, especially if you live in a condo, you can't even go down to the swimming pool, can't even go down to the playground. All you do is just being locked up in your home. And when you live in a high-rise building, right, you can't even touch the ground for 2 years, for 3 months straight. So those would actually have an impact on a child's cognitive development. All right. But these days, even if it's not the lockdown, kids are all locked up inside their homes with their machines, and that's pretty much a dangerous thing. All right. Why does it always go back to here? And then next one would be the pre-operational period. So this is the play school / kindergarten stage. So language acquisition really takes place rapidly at this stage, and one can be confident to understand that kids actually they will have somewhat an adult-like language by the age of 5. So this is why at the age of 4 or 5, if your child is not speaking properly, worse if they're not producing any words by the age of 5, that is reason to be concerned. And you should be taking your child to either an educational psychologist like me, or a clinical psychologist, to actually to look for a diagnosis if the child is autistic, if the child actually has specific learning difficulties, or if the child is neurodivergent and things like that. Because supposedly by the age of 4 or 5, children will already have an adult-like language competence, right? And then when we talk about symbolic thoughts in language, what this actually means is that you have a lot of things going on in your head, right? And most of the time, the things that you think about in your head right now, the voice the voice in your head right now is actually language, right? So you actually think in language. But the thing with language is that language is symbolic. The only reason why you can actually understand the noises that I'm making right now is because you actually understand English. But if you don't understand English, all you'll be hearing is just noise. and you're just seeing like my hands flapping here and there and my facial expressions, and that's all. You cannot make sense of it. You see, like again, if I were to speak in Russian, you won't understand anything. So again, at this stage, we actually have the capacity to understand symbolic thought, which is actually in the form of language. All right. And then the key point here in this stage, the second stage ni, all right, is that thinking is still limited. What they see is what they think. All right, dia tak boleh nak kalau kita kata, kalau dia nampak panjang-panjang lah, kita tak boleh nak kata benda tu pendek ke. Kalau dia kata besar-besar lah, walaupun kita kata benda tu kecil je, ada je benda lagi besar, dia tak boleh nak fikir, dia kata besar-besar lah, like that. And I will show you the experiments in the video to demonstrate all these things where their thinking is is still limited, and they see what they want to see, they think what they want to think, all right? And this brings to the next point where they are very, very, very egocentric. And centration means that it's like they are very like centric on something, and most of the time they're very centric on themselves. Ego means the self-centric means center, so they are very self-centered, all right? And animism is when they play with their dolls and things like that, they have names for their dolls, and as if like the dolls are actually their friend, as if the doll is alive, right? I want to take my doll to the mall today. I want to take Sarah to the mall. I want to take Sarah Semayang Tarawih hari ni, and things like that. So it's very normal. It's very age appropriate. But again, if your boyfriend or your girlfriend actually has names for their cars, and it has a gender, and that could be a cause for concern, basically. So when we talk about egocentrism, right? If you've actually listened to a 4-year-old or 3 or 4-year-old children have conversations with each other, dia macam ayam dengan itik tau. So let's say the one child will actually say, I like eating cakes. And then if you are a cultured adult, you would say, oh, what cake do you like to eat? But when a 3-year-old says, I like to eat cake, and then the other person, which is another 3 or 4-year-old child, will say, yesterday I went to the zoo, instead of picking up on that conversation about the cake. And then this kid, the first kid would say, I like cheesecakes, and then the second kid will still talk about the zoo. There are actually a lot of tigers at the zoo, for example. So dia macam ayam dengan itik, dia tak ada macam kesinambungan bila bercakap tu. Aku nak cakap pasal benda aku je. Yang seorang lagi aku nak cakap pasal zoo je. Like, I don't care about your, so that if you listen to the conversations, it's normally like that. All right. So I hope like none of you actually have this kind of conversations with your boyfriends or girlfriends, because you might be like stuck in this stage. But I do hear that most often a lot of marital issues really has to do with egocentrism. Like this person only talks about themselves, and this one only talks about themselves and their problems, and they don't actually talk with each other, basically. All right. Okay, moving on. Why does it always have to go to this? Moving on. The concrete operations period. All right. So this is sekolah rendah. So the sekolah rendah, 7 to 11 years old, they are able to represent events mentally. So this is why you now start to teach them abstract concepts like maths, sciences, things that they don't even get to see in front of their eyes, but they can imagine them. They can classify objects mentally. So if you look at this from the point of view of academic subjects, these are actually science, maths, and reversing actions, compensating for changes, and they are now able to see from another person's point of view. All right. So bila buat karangan, you can actually ask them to buat karangan about how it's like to be an orphan child, for example. They can do that, but little children, they don't get it, So this is why when you understand cognitive development, you will understand how to better prepare the curriculum for an age-appropriate curriculum. So this is why, again, parents are upset, angry, frustrated, because the current Malaysian curriculum actually talks about tax, like tax for sekolah rendah. I'm like so old and I don't even understand about tax, you see? So those things. All right. Now, next one, formal operations period, all right, is abstract thoughts. Some achieve hypothetical reasoning in secondary school, and then there's also propositional thinking. What this means is that at this stage, they are now capable of thinking about hypothetical situations, all right? Although benda tu tak logik, tapi let's say hypothetically you are in the moon right now and you're doing this and so on. So kalau dalam mathematics tu macam jika ini makanya begini, like it's an and or, like a Venn diagram like that, you know, so they can think that way even though it's not logical. All right, but if you try and talk about things that are illogical with sekolah rendah children, you know, when they say it's illogical, it's illogical. They cannot go beyond that. Most of the time, they cannot go beyond that. All right. Okay. And then, so again, this one, I told you guys just now, the 4 factors influencing development, maturation, that has to do with the physiological processes, the biological process. The activity and the social interaction is where people interact with the physical and the social world, all right? Where you are, where you grew up in, the friends that you hang around with, you know, you hang out with, those are actually going to affect your cognitive development, all right? And then equilibration, response to conflicts and inconsistencies. We'll talk more about that in a while. Okay, so this is the part where we're talking about this equilibration. Let me go ahead and see if I have something in the Putra Blast that would be easier for me to explain. Let me check. Okay, yes, I do. I have I uploaded like a mini PowerPoint slide. Let me show this one. Just talking about the schema. Okay, hold on. Stop presenting. I'm going to present a different window. Okay. Right, that's annoying. Okay. Yeah, I think you guys can see clearly without me even needing to press the presentation, right? Because that's just going to turn my computer funny if I click the presentation mode. All right, so the next one is about that equilibrium, right? Just now, equilibration tadi tu, all right? It starts off with Piaget talking about the concept of assimilation and accommodation. So again, pagi tadi, like an hour ago when you joined my class, right? Depending on whether or not you actually understand my first 2 classes, all right, you are now trying to continue the assimilation and accommodation processes of the new incoming information that I'm telling you with the past information from the past 2 weeks. Okay, so Piaget actually demonstrates this through a simple analogy about how the girl can use dog schema when encountering a cat. So I'm going to take a step back and tell you about the human brain. So the human brain is pretty much, it's not the same as a computer, where a computer you can actually store your files in folders, and then folders like in bigger folders or the subfolders and so on. And, you know, depending on your computer capacity, it could be 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, just 500 gigabyte and things like that, right? The brain is not like that. It does not store information. Okay, ni fizik, dalam tu ada whatever physics, you know, and then chemistry, organic chemistry, physical chemistry, whatever, you know. It doesn't store information in the form of subfolders. And during exam, it doesn't work where your brain actually boleh cari kat folder mana, folder not found, folder has been erased. It's not like that. The way the brain works is that you imagine like a tree, especially pokok yang macam yang besar dekat UPM depan Fakulti Bahasa Moden tu kan, yang menghala ke kubur Cina tu kan, like that kind of tree, you know, the rain tree, like the one in Taiping, like so big, that kind of tree. Okay, so that pokok is your brain, and all the branches are actually schema. Schema is actually concepts that your brain has as a result of the activity. Kalau based on Piaget, dia kata as a result of activity and the social interaction. Atau kalau Vygotsky, his idea is as a result of the social cultural interaction with the environment. All right. So how many branches you have in your brain, how many schemata, how many schemas you have in your brain really depends on the level of social activity that you have, or the social cultural factors kata Vygotsky tu. So the more you engage in a lot of things, dalam kelas you're active, dekat luar you jadi MPP, bertanding lah, apalah, kejap lagi ajak orang baca Yasin, lepas tu jadi imam, lepas tu pergi misi banjir, bantuan banjir, so many life experiences, and therefore you have so many schemas in your brain. All right. So as a child, of course, kids do not have a lot of schema, right? So as a child, the most common thing in a Malaysian household or in a Malaysian neighborhood would be cats, right? Cats, yes. So as the kid, all right, mak ayah dia bawa dia keluar jalan-jalan depan rumah, and then the baby or the child is introduced to a cat. So the child upon seeing the cat, tak pernah jumpa. So tak ada schema pun pasal cat. So the child takes in that new information. Oh, 4 kaki, ada ekor, ada telinga, ada whiskers, cat. In English, ialah macam dia anak orang Damansara kan. So that's a cat. Macam tu, cat. Alright, so it's a cat. And then, as they walk along the park, and then they will then see like a larger animal, all right, 4 legs with a tail, ada 2 telinga, ada whiskers juga, right? So what would the child say? The child will highly likely say, cat, and then the parents, would say, that's not a cat, same like a cat, but it's bigger and it makes a different sound. That's a dog. So initially, the child has it has a new schema in its brain, right? Animal. So there's one branch, animal. So there's the sub branch, which is binatang berkaki 4, whatever it is, So now dia dah ada dua idea in that branch, you see. Oh, ada kucing, ada anjing now. Until the parents will actually then go and bring the child to a zoo. Sekali nampak macam-macam jenis binatang berkaki 4, ada ekor, ada telinga 2, ada whiskers, ada tak ada whiskers dan sebagainya. So that's when they start getting overwhelmed, you see, and they get excited. All right. So again, depending on the child's background experience, some they will actually get to masukkan in the new schema. Some when it gets too overwhelmed, which is so many binatang kan, yang ni ada kaki, tak ada kaki, ada yang tak ada kaki tapi ada flippers and so on. So many things. So some they will remember, some they will not remember, some will become a schema, some will not become a schema because it's too much. Because again, according to Vygotsky tadi, it's beyond the zone of proximal development already. It's no more n+1. It's just too many things coming in at the same time. All right. So classic STEM teachers, you tend to give them too many things at the same time and they cannot process it because their schema yang sifir 8 pun tak hafal, yang so many things going on, and yet you're giving them so many things at the same time. All right, so this process is called assimilation and accommodation. So if we look at this slide, right, how can this girl use her dog schema when encountering a cat? Ini cerita dia terbalik. Dia dah tahu pasal anjing. So dia baru nak, and then dia jumpa a new binatang which is smaller than an anjing. How does she actually accommodate, right? Or assimilate that experience of seeing a cat with her schema, existing schema about a dog. So she can assimilate the experience into a schema by referring to the cat as a dog. All right. Dia nampak cat tu, dog, dia kata kan. Ataupun she can accommodate her animal schema by separating the cat and even different types of dogs into separate schemas. Okay, so So again, your activities, your social activities, the social cultural factors that you engage yourself in will actually enrichen the branches in your brain. Itu yang dipanggil sel-sel otak berhubung tu, kan? Macam tu. What this is saying is that when I give you a lecture today, you are actually trying to either assimilate with past knowledge, or you're trying to accommodate this new incoming information that I'm giving you, like Piaget, Vygotsky, nak masuk kat folder mana, tak tahu branch mana, tak tahu lagi. But okay, I get it. Developmental psychology was what Dr. Marina said last week. So okay, these guys are actually going to fall under developmental psychology, and then there's actually cognitive psychology. So that's why it's always important to have a concept map when you learn, so you can actually see the different schemas that you need to understand. This is also why it's very important for STEM teachers to actually give a general overview of what your lesson is going to be, because you want to tap on the right schemas in kids' brains. You see, whether or not they have that schema, I thought they really have to pay attention and create a new schema. Okay, now going back to the analogy of the tree just now, kan, kalau kita tengok UPM punya pokok tu kan, adalah because you guys duduk dekat UPM beberapa tahun je kan, saya duduk kat UPM like since forever dah, you know. So there will be every other time when they will then prune the pokok, especially yang kalau dah tinggi-tinggi tu kan, ataupun ada dahan yang mati, right, dia akan prune the pokok tu, pokok-pokok besar tu, you know. The brain does that too. Your brain does that too. So you need to understand that when I say dahan-dahan tu is actually your neurons, you know, the pathways where it actually processes information. So when we talk about things yang dah tak relevant in your life, I don't know about you guys, but maybe like you no longer need to remember Arabic at all. Some of you go to sekolah agama belajar bahasa Arab, lepas tu sekarang macam lantak lah bahasa Arab ni kan, ada tafsir Quran, aku baca je lah tafsir. So if I were to actually ask you questions about Arabic, right, some of you go to sekolah agama, sekolah rendah, right, but it's no longer relevant for your survival right now. So adalah sikit-sikit dalam kepala tu, tak tahu kat mana kan, but it's not relevant and you don't even remember them, and therefore the neurons just die off. It just dies away. Itu yang sel-sel otak tidak lagi berhubung tu. So if you can understand this, you will understand why Alzheimer happens. You will understand why dementia happens. You will understand that sebenarnya kebanyakan, I think for the Muslims kan, you ada dengar kan yang kalau kita tak nak nyanyuk, bacalah Quran, right? Bacalah Quran. Sebenarnya dia tak nyanyuk bila baca Quran, sebab bila dia baca Quran, it's not just the Quran tu, but when you membaca, you guna otak. So your neurons will always sentiasa ada electrical pulses. Your schema will always berhubung. Sel-sel otak itu, the neurons sentiasa berhubung. But what happens to our pensioners these days is that the moment they hit 60 years old, they even stop reading altogether. They stop writing altogether. They stop everything. And therefore, the brain, the neurons will somehow, the synapses, you know, the electrical charges, lemah, it goes away. It self-prunes itself, you know, the brain prunes itself. So in my case, right, I'm a psychologist, an educational psychologist. I work at the Faculty of Educational Studies. I don't really need to really understand how to calculate, you know, algebra, do calculus, and so on. I'm really good in stats, you know, but I don't need to like use hand calculations. I'll just use all my whatever fancy statistical softwares I have, you know, the M+, the SPSS, the Stata, so many things, you know. So add maths in my head is pretty much like a distant memory, you know. All that I remember is that my teacher was boring, because that's the core emotional memory that you remember, but the maths itself is just gone from my head because it's not needed in my daily survival, you see. So schema is like, hold on. Schema is actually the many things in your head. So if we can actually play a game really quickly right now, right? I want to demonstrate to you that whatever the thing that comes to your mind, the first word that comes to your mind in the first place, right, is the strongest schema you have about something. So I'm gonna start off with the most dedicated student in this class, Muhammad Shazani. Alright. I nak sebut satu perkataan, and the moment I sebut perkataan tu, what is the first word that comes to your mind when I say that perkataan? Okay, Shazani? And then I'm going to go through the whole list of attendance hari ni. Lepas Shazani, I akan terus tanya Akilah, lepas tu Limeng, lepas tu Wanfai. Alright, what is the first thing that comes to your mind when Shazani says that word? Okay, so I'm just gonna start off with something very simple. Shazani, nasi lemak. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when I say nasi lemak?
Spicy.
Spicy. Okay, Akila, spicy. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when Shazani says spicy?
Lada.
What is it?
Lada.
Lada. Okay, lada. Limang, are you here in class?
Yes,
Hi,
Doctor.
Limang.
Yes.
Okay, so Akila just said a Malay word, lada. Lada. I'm not going to translate it to you. What is the first thing that comes to your mind when she says the word lada? Anything that comes to your mind.
Chicken with rice. Chicken with rice.
Chicken with rice. She knows what lada means. Okay, 1-5. What does come to your mind when Limang says that chicken with rice?
Chicken rice.
Chicken rice. Apa benda korang ni pusing-pusing? Dayanku Mardia, chicken rice. Mardia?
Chicken fries.
Chicken fries. Chicken what? Fried chicken?
Yes.
Fried chicken. Okay. Aisyah Rika, fried chicken. Korang ni lapar ke? Pusing-pusing kat situ. Aisyah Rika, fried chicken. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you say fried chicken?
KFC.
KFC. Fateh Nurshah, KFC.
Delicious.
Delicious. Hakimi Osman, delicious.
Ramadan.
Ramadan. Halimatul Sa'diah, Ramadan.
Tahajud.
Tahajud. Okay, tahajud. Kirtana, tahajud. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when somebody says tahajud in your head? Kirtana? Is it like mine is like loading? Is that what's going on with you, Kirtana? Okay, I'm gonna skip Kirtana because I think it's like mine is loading because maybe she has not heard of the word tahajud before. So Latifah. Tahajud.
Pray.
Pray. Xiaoyan. Pray.
God.
God. Azri. God. Azri pergi menemui Tuhan ke macam mana? Semayang ke apa Azri? Azri, God.
Here, Doctor.
Okay, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when we say God?
Mati.
Mati? Mati. Kushairi, mati. Kushairi, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when Azri says mati? Terus mati pula. Ni, the. Kushairi. Okay, I'm gonna skip Kushairi. Daniel, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when Azri says mati? Pun bertahajud juga ke siang-siang hari ni, Daniel? Daniel? Nazrin, all the boys tahajud siang-siang hari or is it duha? Okay lah duha. Tapi duha sekarang ni kan tengah kelas I. Okay. Nazrin, what comes to your mind when we say mati?
Taubat.
Taubat. Okay. Hafiz, taubat.
Kubur.
Kubur. Ya Allah, mati, kubur, taubat. Okay. Kubur, Safwan, kubur. Safwan, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when we say kubur? Safwan pun bertahajud ke apa? Tak duha. Okay, alright. Oh, hari ni hari Jumaat kan, Tazkiyatun Nafs. Tak pun dia dah awal pergi masjid, bentang sejadah. Okay. Kita husnuzon. Alright, Syahmi. Tadi apa? Kubur Syahmi, kubur.
Yasin.
Yasin. Nabiha, Yasin. Nabiha, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when we say Yasin? Oh, Nabiha pun pergi bentang sejadah juga. Okay, Natasha, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when we say Yasin? Best lah buat kelas macam ni kan. Kita tahu siapa yang ada kat depan komputer ke, dia memang dia ada je. Okay, I'm just gonna go random right now, okay? Farah Shazwaha, Farah, what's
Yes,
the first thing
Doctor.
that comes to your mind when we say Yasin?
Friday.
Friday. Malam Jumaat ke Friday? Friday lah. Okay. Farihan, Friday.
Solat Jumaat.
Solat Jumaat. Maisara, solat Jumaat. Aku tak pergi macam tu kan.
Waktu Zohor.
Waktu Zohor. Akila, waktu Zohor. Tidur macam tu ke? Apa?
Akilah mana doktor?
Apa dia?
Akilah mana satu?
Oh, ini Nur Akila. You lah.
Oh, tidur betul?
Tidur. Qailullah kan. Sunat. Yelah. Okay, Nur Aisyah Sofia. Tidur.
Yes, Doctor. What?
Tidur.
Sorry, Doctor.
What's the first thing that comes to your mind when we say tidur?
Resting.
Resting. Alia, resting. Nur Alia Nisa. Oh, nama korang semua banyak sama. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when we say resting? Dia macam loading pula kan. Dia tak tahu apa macam resting, I'm not sure. Berehat, resting. Alia, I don't think I can hear your voice. Alia? Nur Alia Nisa? Energy, I see. Okay, Nur Shazmin, energy. What's the first thing that comes to your mind when we say energy? Are you going to think about chemistry and physics or what? Shazmin? Ni banyak kena potong markah ke apa ni? Kena balik buat kelas fizikal ke apa ni? Okay, Shazmin tak tahu kat mana. Syahidatul. Apa tadi energy?
Energy.
Makan. Ni pasal bulan Ramadan ke apa? Okay, makan. Nurul Syahada, makan. Nurul Syahada pun tak ada. Nurul Syahada, makan. Buka puasa. Fatimah, buka puasa.
Pukul 7.23.
7.23, Husna. Husna, 7.23. What comes to your mind?
Maghrib.
Maghrib. Umi Syahada, Maghrib.
Solat jemaah.
Oh, solat jemaah. Ada siapa? Umi Syahada dah ada boyfriend? Okay. Solat jemaah. Zainida, last one. Solat jemaah. Tak boleh fikir dah. Zainida. Zainida pun bentang sejadah juga. Okay, ramai pula girls yang bentang sejadah kat masjid awal pagi ni ya. Okay, alright. So now what I'm trying to say here is that we started off by talking about nasi lemak, right? And we ended up with solat jemaah basically. So nasi lemak pergi kepada cili, lada dan sebagainya, chicken with rice and then fried chicken, KFC, and then Ramadan, and then energy, tidur, semayang, mati, kubur and so on. You see, what I'm trying to say here is that if I say any random words, it will actually evoke different words or different experiences, different feelings to the 39 of you, all right? Simply because of the fact that our schema is different from one another, All right. That is why you can like pink, you can hate pink, you can be obsessed with pink. You can whatever. The moment I say pink, ada dah nyanyi lagu Blackpink maybe dalam kepala, those things. So that is a person's schema, and it is highly affected by the environment. So again, the brain doesn't know what's important, what's not important to you. All right. But your behavior, kalau day in, day out, all you do is just watch K-drama. So the moment I say words about K-drama, ting, 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 kepala you kan, macam tu. What this also means is that kalau hari like minggu exam nanti, and kalau you tengok your exam paper, lepas tu you just macam bling, bukan yang Blackpink punya bling tu, memang macam you kedip-kedip je mata tengok your exam paper, tak tahu apa-apa, that's just simply because of the fact that schema you tak ada. Why? Because masa minggu pertama sampai minggu 14, you tak ada, you're not paying attention, you're not listening and so on. There's no assimilation, no accommodation, no new schemas, no new branches, sel-sel neuron tidak berhubung, right? And therefore you are in a state of equilibrium ke disequilibrium, right? So kalau you nak tahu, the easiest way to success, simple aja, is a matter of maintaining equilibrium for all of the classes that you take. Kalau you ambil 5 subjek, hari ni you pergi my class, you faham everything A to Z, insyaAllah you are in equilibrium. Okay, you're ready to meet me again next week, wherever I left off from this week, alright? But if you decided like macam you're not going to pay attention, tak apalah, psychology, semua tu ada dalam buku, nanti aku hafal aje lah masa malam exam and so on, kan? So, you are in a state of disequilibrium this week, and then next week I'm going to be talking about something entirely different, and then you don't even know anything from this week, but I'm going to relate whatever that's next week with this week, with the past week, right? So you're going to be in a constant state of disequilibrium. So there's one open tab in your head, which is FCE 3200. Lepas tu you masuk a different class, another open tab, and then if by now your FYP project, you should have already have all your up until your method section ready, but you don't have anything yet. So that's another tab. So that's pretty much the recipe to mental health issues down the road, especially among youngsters lah. So that's basically the schema, okay? We all have different schemas simply because of the fact that our life experiences is different, okay? All right, so to recap that, this is what it pretty much looks like. So there's let's say we start off at equilibration lah. So pagi tadi everybody somehow remembers facts and takeaway points from my first 2 classes. So everybody came to the class in a state of equilibrium, right? And then here's a new situation where I'm talking to you about a cognitive development, and there's like 2 alien names like Piaget and Vygotsky, and there are 4 stages of cognitive development. Now you actually have to remember those 4 stages of cognitive development. And then there's Vygotsky talking about social cultural factors and the zone of proximal development. Depending on your level of attention, depending on your level of understanding, and you connecting and assimilating and accommodating, you're in a state of disequilibrium. But if you can accommodate and then assimilate with your past schema, you will go back to a state of equilibrium. That's just pretty much in simpler non-cognitive science or non-neuroscience terms what's going on in your head. All right. And then again, just to recap, you have a schema. The boy dah tahu pasal the cat. And then when the boy saw a cub and called it a cat, the older sister says, no, that's not a cat, it's a cub. A baby tiger is a cub. So you assimilate your new information with the past schema about cats. So now you accommodate that new schema about the cat, about the tiger, the cub with a cat, something like that. And then again, accommodation, all right? You saw this 4-legged animal for the first time and you call her 4-legged pet doggy. So when you see that cow, you say, that's a big doggy, mommy, So that's accommodation. You're trying to accommodate your current schema with new information. So depending on whether or not somebody is there to correct or not correct the child, this is where sometimes in language we call it fossilized errors. So in English, especially in the Malaysian English, there's a lot of fossilized errors due to errors in accommodation. For example, when we say congratulations, right? Congratulations. Malays suka sebut apa? Congrate, ada E kan? Tak ada siapa betulkan kan? Right? So you salah accommodate in your head. So the next time around you want to be cool, you cakap congrate. There's no such thing as congrate. It's congrats. Alright, it's congrats. There's no congrate. And that saya ni kan pembeli Shopee yang tegar, right? So suka baca review kan. Lepas tu bila baca review saya selalu baca kan, saya nampak dekat review section kan, Sala. Terima kasih Sala, ship laju ship barang, you know, Sala. Sala is actually SALLER, Sala. You know, I think Malaysians like to, you know, speak English, which is a good thing, you know. So, you know, like perkataan jual, sale, right? So dia tambahnya R kat belakang, so Sala instead of seller, you know, seller, so dia tadi Sala. So seorang guna, rasa macam okay, so ramai guna. Terima kasih Sala, Sala ship laju, Sala bungkus bagus, you know, Sala. So fossilized error is a result of wrong accommodation because tak ada siapa yang correct it. All right, so there's a lot of fossilized errors in language, and when we look at STEM, you know, like the physics and maths and sciences, there could potentially be wrong accommodation and wrong assimilation with past knowledge, and that's when you realize that kids actually get some concepts wrong. All right, like in the US, kids always get it wrong when it comes to like snowman. What does it take to make sure that the snowman doesn't melt? If we actually put a coat on the snowman, can the snowman not melt faster? You know, so things like that are like science things that relates with day-to-day life experiences that kids can get wrong, you see? And kids might think that, or maybe if you put a coat on the snowman is going to be warm, and therefore the snowman is going to melt. Well, the snowman has no physiological processes, you see? So those wrong accommodations is where the teacher then needs to correct them. So that's why the role of a teacher is still very much relevant and very important, even though there are a lot of online classes and so on. The talaki part still needs to be there, all right? Because we don't want fossilized errors to happen. Okay. And then, okay, so I think that's just pretty much it about that equilibration part. So let's just get back to our slides really quickly before I wrap up the class. Let's talk about the Piaget really quickly. Okay, mana pula pergi dia ni? Sekejap. Okay. A window, this one, share. Okay, hide. Okay. Now let's move on to talking about, just really quickly, talking about Piaget. All right. I've actually given you the gist of Piaget. It's not like something that's otherworldly, but again, enough for you to remember that Piaget says that your brain, even though you have like Intel i7 and then your RAM is big, like 32 gig of RAM and so on. I mean, fast, you know. But if there is no input from the environment, you're essentially as good as nothing, right? And we've watched the Oksana Malaya case, the Genie case in California, and so on. So Vygotsky argued that infants born with a capacity for specific patterns of action, all right, we are born to actually capture patterns and information from the environment. You know, we can acquire a sequence of skills and competencies, you know, language being the most important one that we can actually acquire. So that is why, you know, as Muslims, you will know that language is actually a sign of God's greatness, because we have hundreds, if not thousands, of different languages, right? And humans are actually capable of inventing a language and actually speaking in languages, different languages. Otherwise, I mean, languages is actually just sounds being put together. So That's pretty much like one of the miracles. And the other thing is cognitive development is an outcome of interaction between a child, its carers, meaning that you as your child's parents, you as your student's teacher, and the environment. So you are highly responsible for your students' cognitive development, whether you shape or break them in your 2 years serving as their maths, science, physics, chemistry teachers. All right. That is why, again, research has shown that you actually account for 30% of the students' success, because you are definitely a significant part of a child's immediate environment. All right. Okay. And then social cultural origins of cognitive development. So Piaget wants to actually say that there are lower mental functions and higher mental functions. So the lower mental functions is pretty much like the vision, hearing, taste, and so on. But the higher mental functions would be like the abstract thinking, how to operate internally in your head. That's actually called self-regulation, all the voices in your head, right? So some people have actually good self-regulation. Some people don't have good self-regulation. And these higher mental functions can be used to control your lower mental functions. And then, wait, I think I just wanted to actually talk about the zone of proximal development. So let me check. Okay, so again, according to Piaget, this zone of proximal development can be represented, can be represented, sekejap ya, dia tak nak besar pula. I know what's wrong with my computer. Hold on. It's pretty much like stuck like this. Hold on. Okay, there we go. All right, so the zone of proximal development again can be represented by the formula of n+1. So n is the level of the student's current stage of whatever it is in chemistry, in physics, in maths, right? And your job is to actually provide an achievable level of support so that they can move one level higher, one level higher, one level higher, all right? And Vygotsky, and there's also this other guy called Brunner, they say that students can only achieve learning processes or trying to understand things, right, better through scaffolding. So you know that new buildings, right? Kalau kita tengok, especially in KL, there's a lot of new buildings every single week, every single month. Macam habis-habis, the development projects. So you will see that newly erected buildings will actually have yang apa tu? I don't know what it's called in Malay.
Tiang, dia macam tiang.
Ya, dia macam tiang kan. Apa bukan jerejak? No, jerejak is actually a pulau in Penang. Cancang. I don't know what to call it, but yeah, those tiang. And if you don't know what they're for, they're actually to scaffold the building. They are actually to support the building as the building gets up and up and up and up. Okay? If you don't have those scaffolds, the building could potentially collapse, especially if things are still not set, the concretes and so on. So the fundamental idea here is that if you want to nurture a child, whether it's your child, your students, your job, your main role as a teacher is not to teach, but to scaffold. A good teacher or a good supervisor and so on, like I'm a supervisor as well, right? So a good supervisor is not one who actually teaches their FYP students to perancah, itulah macam perancah, jerejak bukan jerejak, perancah, that's right. But nobody actually uses the word perancah, right? So a good, let's say a good FYP supervisor is not someone who actually tells you, ini ya you kena buat ni, ini ya dia punya equipments, this is the methods, all right? So you just replicate it, that's not what a good teacher is like. A good teacher is one where you actually scaffold the child. Contohnya lah kan, kalau you belajar bawa kereta, right? You are at the driver's seat, right? And then the instructor is actually on the passenger seat, right? Whatever it is, the teacher is not the one who's driving and then you watch the teacher. No, the teacher is the one who's sitting at the passenger seat. You are at the driver's seat. You are holding the steering. You are going where you want to go, right? But if you need to stop and you don't know how to stop, the teacher will stop you, the instructor. The teacher will actually correct you as you drive, you see? So a good teacher, a good parent is someone who actually scaffolds, not someone who preaches and you kena buat ni, you kena buat ni, you kena buat tu, this is good for you, pergi buat medik, you kena jadi doktor, and so on, A good parent is not one who actually prescribes medicine like a doctor, but someone who actually scaffolds and allows the kids to become who they want to be. They are still at the driver's seat. Okay, so that's scaffolding. But ada pula jenis pensyarah yang macam aku tengok je lah YouTube tu kan, ada semua kat dalam tu. Tak pun the worst kind of lecturer or teacher is one yang suruh student dia present daripada awal sampai habis, dia duduk kat belakang. Lepas tu dia main telefon kat belakang kan. Lepas tu tahu-tahu kita dapat B je kan. Macam tu. So that's not a good teacher, that's not a good lecturer, that's not a good supervisor. A good teacher, supervisor, parent is someone who actually scaffolds. Your job is to facilitate the learning process, but the kids themselves are at the driving seat. Okay? All right. Worse is when teachers and lecturers are actually leveraging on technology for everything. Like everything is like macam kau mainlah Kahoot tu, kau buatlah quiz kat dalam ni, kau tengoklah aku punya ni kat dalam Putra Blast. That's not nurturing by any definition. Okay, all right, so do not be those kinds of teachers, because you need to understand that you play a significant role in kids' lives. Okay, all right, so I think, let me check. So I think that's just pretty much it, because the next part is already information processing approaches. All right, so this one I will talk more in a different topic later. So just to recap again with you guys, all right, so this topic really talks about cognitive development. There is Piaget that talks about the 4 stages of cognitive development, and then there's Vygotsky that talks about the social cultural environment plays a huge role in cognitive development, and he says about the zone of proximal development, where you should always try and introduce things that are only one level slightly higher than the child's current level, and you should scaffold. All right, so to wrap up the class, I would want to show you guys I know some of you proactive students may have watched the video, but I like to actually go through them in class. All right, so let's watch this video that I have actually uploaded on Putra Blast on the Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development. Sebabnya the first group assignment that I want you to do is to actually come up with a short video documentary trying to demonstrate that you understand Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development by recording live experiments with real people. Okay, in other words, I actually want you to replicate this video, but you can actually go on the internet and you can actually look for different experiments to actually demonstrate that betul lah, kids at as babies up to 2 years old, they are at the sensory motor period. Kids at the age of 2+ to 5-6 years old, they are actually at the pre-operational stage, and so on. So I want you to demonstrate your understanding by coming up with this mini documentary. All right, so you're gonna ask me, is it okay if I do it in Malay? It's okay. If you want to do it in English, boleh. Like if you're doing it in a different language that I might potentially don't understand, like maybe you nak rakam dalam, let's say bahasa Jawa ke, kan, bahasa Banjar ke, let's have a subtitle kat bawah. You can do that. It's really up to you. Okay, so let's watch this video about the 4 stages of cognitive development. Okay.
New babies aren't quite sure what happens to objects when they leave their sight. Sky's mom keeps disappearing and reappearing. No wonder peekaboo is so much fun. During their first year, however, infants will learn an important concept: object permanence. Everything has a life of its own, even if it is out of sight.
At Maya's age, babies know to look for the object, but they might not have everything else straight. 10-month-old Simon is about to make a classic mistake. Although he watched us place the toy plane under the white cloth, he'll look for it where he last found it, not where he watched us hide it.
Can you look at these two glasses? Do you think that they have the same amount of juice?
All right. So just now was the sensory motor period. All right. It talks about object permanence. All right. There are other experiments that you can look up for that actually demonstrates that particular age group. Now, the next age group here is the Sekolah Tadika, right? So this one actually talks about how they see things as how they want to see things, you know, like conservation tasks, they are not good at it yet. So what I'm trying to say here is that kids at this stage, right, kalau macam you guys ada adik-adik kecil ataupun ada anak-anak buah, kalau kita bagi katakanlah duit raya, katakanlah ada 2 anak buah, right, yang bayar yang tadika ni kan, seorang kita bagi duit merah RM10, seorang lagi kita bagi duit biru, duit RM1 tapi 10 keping, right? And then siapa yang akan jadi upset? Yang dapat sekeping duit warna merah tu, you know? Kenapa? Sebab dia rasa dia dapat 1. Yang seorang lagi dapat 10, you know? And then you penatlah berbuih-buih mulut cakap, sama. Tak tahu ke sama? Tak, dia memang tak tahu. Memang tak sama bagi dia. Alright? Yang dia tahu, seorang dapat banyak, seorang dapat sikit. Okay, sama juga macam kalau this one gelas, alright, I have to show it to you, I have to tell you first. So air sama banyak, 200 ml, 200 ml, satu masuk cawan yang rendah, you know, bulat rendah, satu lagi masuk cawan tinggi. So tinggi tapi kurus, sama-sama 200 ml. So children at this stage, dia akan kata yang mana lagi banyak, dia akan kata yang dia nampak tinggi tu lagi banyak. So kalau you guys pun pergi kedai mamak pun nampak macam jealous je kawan nanti kan, kedai mamak kan dia punya gelas tu banyak yang beza-beza size kan, you know, dan mamak tu terang lah kan, sama, kita kata tak sama, mungkin kita stuck kat stage ni lah. But that's my point here. And then when they reach to a higher level, they would understand that 10 ringgit is 10 ringgit and it equals to like 10 keping. Itu kalau sekolah rendah. That okay already. Alright. But at the school, at the Tadika, they don't get it. They just don't get it. The other thing that I want to tell you about this level, there's a different experiment after this, is about egocentrism. So there's a model. So the student sits here, the child sits here, there's the experimenter. So the experimenter tanya, what can you see from here? So dia cakap lah ada kambing, ada lembu ke apa. Alright, and then the experimenter suruh tukar tempat macam ni. Alright, so bila tukar tempat, ada swap. So the experimenter tanya, what can I see from here? Dia dah nampak dah tadi kan, sebab the child memang duduk sebelah sini tadi kan. So bila dia tukar tempat, sepatutnya dia cakap lah apa yang the experimenter nampak. Sebab dia pun nampak je dari sebelah sini. Tak, dia cakap apa yang dia nampak. Dia cakap apa yang dia nampak je, walaupun the experimenter tanya, what can I see? See? So kids at this stage are very egocentric, and you need to understand that autistic children are also egocentric. It's just about them. They don't know anything about everyone else. I don't care about your feelings, what you like, and so on. Because autistic children, is a spectrum, all right? There are varying degrees of autism. So the main common theme that labels them as autistic children is because they really lack theory of mind. They don't understand what other people think, what other people feel. It's really just about them. Okay? All right. So let's watch the video until the end.
You think they have the same? Okay. Now we're going to pour this juice into this glass. Now, do you think that this glass has more juice? This glass has more juice, or do you think that they have the same amount?
That one has more.
This one has more, and why do you think that this one has more?
Because it's taller.
Okay, you ready? Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more quarters, or do they have the same?
1, 2, 3. Wait. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They're both the same.
They're the same?
5, 5.
Okay. Okay. Does this row have more quarters? Does this row have more, or do they have the same?
This one has more.
That one has more quarters?
Yeah.
Why does this row have more quarters?
Because it's more far away.
It's more far away.
Yeah, it's more far away than that. Looks bigger.
All right, we're gonna play a game with the graham crackers, and we're gonna share them between me and you.
So
okay?
ni sharing graham crackers, share biscuit.
Do you think that we shared those fairly?
No.
No, why not?
You have those and I have this one.
Well, what if we try this? Okay, can I put this down right there?
Okay.
Now is it fair?
Yeah.
Yeah, why is it fair now?
Because we both have two.
See, we
Can you
both
tell
have
me
to
what you see when you look at that from where you're
those
sitting?
centricism part.
What are some of the things that you see?
And a cat.
A cat.
And a tree and a bone.
Okay, now we're gonna do the same thing. Can you tell me what you see when you look at it from that stool?
They can only see
An
immediate
owl?
things in front of them. They cannot see apa yang dia dah nampak tadi.
What is that?
Cannot recall.
A goat.
A goat.
Yeah.
Okay, is there anything else you see?
Yeah, right there.
Right there, what is that?
A tree.
A tree.
And that's another little tree.
Another little tree?
Right.
Okay. And can you tell me what I see when I look at this from where I'm sitting right here?
An owl.
Okay.
And a goat.
Mm-hmm.
And a little tree. And that. And that.
So he can only say what he can see. See? All right. So this one is the sekolah rendah. Doing the same experiment, but sekolah rendah.
same amount of juice in this glass as there is in that glass?
They're even.
They're even? Okay. So we're gonna take the juice from this glass and pour it into this one right here.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're gonna look at this glass and that one. So do you think that there's more juice in this glass, more juice in this glass, or do you think that they have the same amount?
Same amount.
Okay, why do you think that they have the same amount?
Just because this is skinny doesn't mean it's not the same amount. It has the same amount of juice in it, but this one is just wider and this one's skinnier, but they have the same amount of juice in it.
It says if you hit a glass with a hammer,
Okay,
the glass
this
will
one-
break.
Hold on. Sorry. This one actually talks about hypothetical thinking. All right. So it's trying to tell you that kids at the sekolah rendah age, kids at the sekolah rendah age, they can only think logical things, like straightforward logical things. So because maybe the American English is a bit fuzzy, right? There's a hypothetical situation where the experimenter says, Jack hits the mirror or the glass with a hammer. What happens to the glass? All right, it breaks, right? Because hammer kan pukul besi, ketuk glass, pecah. All right, and then the experimenter says Jack hit the mirror with a feather, and the feather broke. you know. It's a hypothetical situation. Macam kita buat research, buat apa, you know, like when you studied maths last time kan, jika ini maka ini, jika ni atau whatever it is, you know. So it's hypothetical, but the child keeps arguing because to him in the real life, feathers cannot break glass. Okay. Now the next stage is the formal operations, you know, the 12 years old and above, right? So that section in this video, they'll demonstrate the same experiment, this one, and then that big girl, the older girl, is able to actually say, well, the glass broke because the glass hit the feather, you know, something like that. So let me play it for you so that you would understand that at the higher level, kids are able to engage in hypothetical reasoning.
With a hammer, the glass will break.
Okay, good job.
It says, if you hit a glass with a hammer, the glass will break.
I knew that.
And then this one says, Dawn hit a glass with a hammer.
I knew that too.
So what happened to the glass?
It broke
It broke. Why did it break?
because the hammer's hard.
If you hit a glass with a feather, the glass will break.
No, it won't.
And this is the second rule. Dawn hit a glass with a feather. What happened to the glass?
Nothing.
Nothing happened. Why didn't anything happen?
Because the feather is soft.
Because the feather is soft. Look at this. So this is the final one.
If you hit a glass with a feather, the glass will break. Okay. And the second one, Dawn hit a glass with a feather. What happened to the glass?
It broke.
And why did it break?
Because the rule says if you hit a glass with a feather, it'll break. So if you hit a glass with a feather, it broke.
So that's pretty much the 4 stages of cognitive development. This is a fairly recent video. What I'm saying is that it's not a video from the 70s or the 60s. What it's trying to say is that for some reason, Piaget's theory about the 4 stages of cognitive development still stays true for some reason. All right, so I would want you to actually go ahead in your teams, especially during Raya, you have access to kids of different ages, right? Different age groups. So you would want to actually demonstrate in a less than 10-minute video documentary about your understanding of the 4 stages of cognitive development. So I want you to actually conduct real experiments with little children, especially at the tadika age, especially if they are younger primary school students. Then you will understand that when you actually have things like green technology in the curriculum or talking about taxes and so on, it just doesn't make sense because kids cannot think in abstract. You know, they don't even have purchasing power just yet. Baru nak belajar pergi beli gula-gula kat 7-Eleven, beli Slurpee kat 7-Eleven, and then now you're talking about tax. You know, how is that even relevant to a child's day-to-day life, right? So those things, because I know that one day you guys will end up being big people out there, you know, nazir sekolah, you know, pengarah pelajaran daerah negeri, you might be working in Putrajaya. For all I know, maybe you will be the pengarah bahagian pembangunan curriculum BPK in KPM. So you need to understand basic psychology, you need to understand basic cognitive development, so that the curriculum in for the kids of our country will not be crappy, you know, because like I said, a failed curriculum actually affects an entire generation. That's the danger part of being a social scientist or a social engineer, right? Because you're engineering the human cohort one generation at a time. So a failed curriculum also means a failed generation, and a failed generation actually impacts the whole country. So that's as far as teachers or educators' influence isn't concerned. It just doesn't stop in the classroom. All right, so let me check what else I have in here. Hold on. Wait, why is my screen frozen? Wait. Oh, why is it going here? Okay, so if you guys can see, this is the group assignment. All right, group assignment 1 out of 2 is the Piaget stages of cognitive development. You guys can, tak ada pula. Hilang pula sekejap ya. Here. So you can see I shared like a Padlet here of past students. So when you complete your video, you can actually upload it on YouTube and so on. And then normally I would ask past students to also share their videos in this Padlet. So you have 2 tasks to do once you're done with this assignment. One thing is you need to submit the URL in this link. If you click here, there's a submission link. All right, make sure that you submit it. So there are 10 groups here. So make sure you submit your link here for my ease of marking. All right. So I can watch all 10 videos through this link, but you would also want to actually click on this Padlet and share your experiments in here as well. And feel free to actually look into your past seniors' work. There are students, BSDP students that I have taught over the years, and they might have actually shared their work in here as well. Okay, so all these videos are raw as it is, you know, so some are good, some are mediocre, but most actually tried doing their best. Okay, so feel free to do this during the mid-semester break, during Raya. Nanti have fun doing it. All right, so do you guys have any questions at all for me? I don't want to keep you guys any further in this class. Okay, Shazadi, you have a question. That's great.
It's about the test 1. So
yep.
Will there be like MCQ questions, or is it
test 1? Test 1. Oh, test 1. Okay, so test 1 actually covers chapters 1, 2, 3, and 4. Covers the first chapter hari tu, second chapter this week, and then we're going to talk about social emotional development next. So chapters 1 to 4, and it's not going to be asked again in the final exam. MCQs only. And I think there's going to be like about 40 questions, 20% of marks. But the biggest issue that we have right now is we don't know when to do it. Highly likely we may do it on week 8. I will try and find a way on how to do it with you guys during week 8, simply because of the fact that we're not going to have classes on week 6. In fact, some classes, kalau tak batal pun, is still going to be online, right? And then we have that 1 week of holiday. And then when we come back on week 7, hari Isnin and hari Rabu, cuti. So one of your classmates have actually highlighted to me that kalau boleh dia nak samalah cuti seminggu. And I agree. So I said that our first test should be on Friday of Friday week 7. So one of your classmates cakap, tapi doktor, hari Isnin dan hari Rabu cuti. So kalau boleh kita cuti je lah seminggu tu. Okay, I agree. So mungkin kita akan buat our test 1 during week 8. I don't feel like doing it between like week 4, 5, 6. I don't want to do it before Raya. I want to do it after Raya. But we'll try and do it minggu ke-8. Now my problem with that is minggu ke-8 selalunya sistem tutup. Sistem nak isi markah tu dah tutup, because that is about the time where you need to decide for yourself, you nak teruskan dengan this course or you want to drop it and take it during a different semester. But most of the time nobody has ever dropped my class, because this is a class wajib that you have to take anyway to graduate. If you don't take it with me, you have to take it with a different lecturer anyway, right? So that has not been an issue with me in the past. So katakanlah the system tutup, dia akan buka balik masa final exam week tau. So what I can do is that if I cannot put your marks in there by week 8, I can share with you guys your marks. If you need to know how you're doing, something like that lah. But I'm looking at week 8 lah kita buat exam. Okay? Dalam kelas ke, hari Isnin tu ke, macam mana ke. Tapi MCQ, 14 soalan, topics 1 to 4. Okay? Okay, earlier Nisat tanya, is it possible if a kindergartner child have a cognitive development of a primary school child? Of course, that's very, very possible, because thank you for the question. You know, if you look at physical development, right? Some kids gigi luruh awal lagi sekolah tadika gigi dah tanggal, you know, and then ada yang dah janda baru nak tanggal. That's very normal. So what I'm saying here is that people's developmental milestone is different from one another, but if you understand statistics, you understand the normal bell curve, so you would understand that more or less most children at a certain age period, they fall under the normal curve. So when we talk about the 4 stages of cognitive development, we're talking about kids young at the normal curve. There will be outliers. So the one that Alianisa is saying is, like you're saying, is it possible that a child could actually have a primary school level of cognition? It's possible. They could be outliers, you know, outliers whether they're slow or they are pandai. Okay, so kalau slow, in educational psychology, this is where we actually have things like pendidikan kanak-kanak berkeperluan khusus. We have kids yang ada learning difficulties, so they might have dyscalculia, dysgraphia, dyslexia, ASD, autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, attention deficient hyper disorder, you know, so they could fall under yang slow, you know, because their information processing could be impaired, ada disorder, ada chemical imbalances in the head that could actually lead to having attention deficient hyper disorder, that some kids need to be medicated to create balance, chemical balance in their brains, all right? And there would be at the other end too, it could be gifted children. So this is the one yang bila kita buat ujian UKM 1, UKM 2, dia masuk kelas pintar cerdas, dia masuk yang dekat USIM ada Genius Insan, and there's another one in Pendang. Any one of you from Kedah? There's one in Academy Science Pendang, and there's many other sekolah genius. So for kids with so-called IQ of above 125, macam itulah lebih kurang. Okay, so memang ada. It's pretty normal because cognitive development is just one type of development. Dia sama je macam physical development. Ada yang telinga besar dulu kan, ada yang mata besar dulu, ada yang gigi besar dulu. Sama juga next week we will talk about social emotional development, if I'm not mistaken, and that's the part where I think as a teacher, as a parent, you really must understand, because dalam syllabus tak ada, dalam curriculum tak ada, and even as Malays, Chinese and Indian and others, you know, as Malaysians lah basically, as Asians, tak kisahlah Korean, Japanese, you rarely take into account the social-emotional part. Memang kita macam anggap tak ada je, you know, and that's what's most important, and that could differentiate between you as just any other teacher or a very significant teacher in a student's life, right? That social-emotional development part. Okay, so thank you guys. Thank you for the questions. You feel free to ask me more in the WhatsApp, in the Telegram group, right? I'll see you guys same place, same virtual space next week. Hari Jumaat 8:30 pagi lah, alright? Sebab duha masuk dalam 7.45 macam tu kan. So bolehlah duha dulu, zikir dulu kan. Lepas tu masuk kelas. Macam tu. Okay? Alright, thank you so much. Have a great weekend. Stay safe and stay happy. Goodbye, everyone. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye.
Thank you, Doctor.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Doctor.